Well, good morning, everyone. A happy Thursday. This is another session in the 8th Annual Transformative Teaching and Learning Environment Virtual Conference presented by Pennsylvania State System of Higher Education. Our session this morning is one of 60 hour-long sessions we have through Friday of next week. I'm Bob Hales, and I'm your moderator for the session. As you can see, our title is Innovative Distance Education, Accessibility and Usability Training. And we have with us two really excellent presenters. And so let me turn it over to Corey and Kara.
Thanks, Bob. I appreciate it. And thank you, everyone, for signing into our session. My name is Corey Singleton, and I'm the Assistive Technology Initiative Manager at George Mason University. And I've been here almost 9 years now. And I'll turn it over to Kara now.
And I actually was at George Mason for almost 9 years, and I've just now recently moved over to Miami University here in Ohio. So I'm the Accessible Technology Specialist. So thanks for joining us. So moving along, we are going to try to go through this agenda a little quickly. I want to preface it that we can send a copy of our PowerPoint to anyone interested. Just shoot us an email, and that way you can get all of the information. We'll have a resource slide at the end with some of the links to some of the things that we're talking about. So that way you're not going to have to ask throughout the PowerPoint what a link might be or anything else like that, so we can send that out to you. So starting out, really looking at what are the terms. There's so many of them, and how that really defines what we're doing in regard to accessibility, face-to-face courses, online courses, and everything from there. So most of the time when we're working with faculty, they are used to hearing an accommodation. And an accommodation, a student has to self-disclose, and they're provided on an individual basis, and it kind of just works itself out from there. Well, when we're talking about online learning and the courses that are going to be developed and using e-learning, whether it's a hybrid class or whatever it might be, we're really talking about accessibility. So that's where the course should be accessible out of the box. And that way we also look at the guidelines of WCAG 2.0 AA, and that's we're going to be looking at the learning management system, the files and the courses that's going to be used within the course itself. And that way it's going to be out of the box. So if a student does self-disclose, whether it's the first day of class or the first week of class, everything's already made accessible, and there's no accommodation per se that's necessarily needed unless it's some extra time or something like that. So trying to understand accommodations with assistive technology. AT can actually be an accommodation, but it's not necessarily always the solution. So looking at that, an individual may still have an assistive technology software such as JAWS, which is a Freedom Scientific screen reader. But at the same time, if our documents or online courses aren't accessible, that assistive technology is going to be useless to the student themselves. So trying to break that down and work with the faculty to help them understand as well are some of the things that we're doing here. So with sensory, we have a lot of different types of assistive technology. Most people do think of it as blind, low vision, and screen readers. But also we have different organizational or readability software. Read and Write Gold is a really large one in higher education, K through 12. But we also have some physical AT as well, so, such as text-to-speech, Dragon Naturally Speaking, or now that some of the technologies are getting a little bit smarter, some of the built-in things that we're using, such as the voice on our phones. So what do we know? We are seeing a lot of different trends in higher education. So we're seeing increasing numbers with students with disabilities. We're seeing a greater implementation of online or e-learning courses versus your face-to-face. So that growth in distance education is really rising, and it also allows the universities to be able to have a larger, diverse environment. A lot of students that might not necessarily have been a student, so their numbers are rising overall. So with that, we also are starting to see a growing number of legal challenges for those students with disabilities versus the higher education. So within that recent litigation, you'll see that really no stone goes unturned. UC Berkeley is actually, again, They were in 2013 for some different reasons, and now they're back again in 2016. MIT Harvard was probably one that a lot of folks know about as well, because that was for the MOOC, for the online edX stuff. So all of these are going to have a different part along the road. I really suggest that looking at these, it gives a good roadmap for anyone really trying to build and work in accessibility, because each one had to face their own different challenges. So how does everything tie together? So we talked about assistive technology and accommodations, but really in order for both of those to work, we have to have an accessible electronic and information technology, which is your course environment, your learning management systems, the documents and the modules that's within the online learning. And by pulling all of those together, we do actually have and can provide equal access for all students. So it doesn't really matter where you start, because it's a continuous cycle. So if you are a faculty member that you really are focused on the different learning styles, and that's part of what you understand, but you are starting to learn about accessibility and universal design, it doesn't matter, whether you're also just working on some of the videos, the documents. Regardless of wherever you start, it's a continuous cycle to where all of it's going to play together, and it will eventually kind of come out at the end to have a larger universal design aspect that Corey will talk to a little bit more. So with all of those things, where do we start? Where would you start in a university? So first and foremost, we really have to look at the roles and responsibilities. Accessibility is certainly a team effort, and everyone plays a role of some sort. So whether it is the president or provost of the university, down to an admin within one of the departments, or faculty members, IT professionals, anybody else that it might be, it all starts somewhere. So most of the time, Corey and I have both seen things, we burn the candle at both ends, and sometimes we meet in the middle. Some's going to burn a little faster than others, but that's going to be dependent upon the university. So with that said, do you have accessibility staff within your environment? Looking at, do you have a committee, an accessibility committee? Do you know who some of your key stakeholders might be? Are you doing any policy or procurement, or are you doing any trainings across the board for equal communication? So if you would ask the question of what is accessibility, is everyone going to give you the same answer? Trying to define some of the requirements through those, and really then breaking that down into your developers, your content managers, your academic groups, to try to actually look at creating some accessible projects. So with that, when we're looking at teaching faculty, if you're looking at a role or responsibility, we do try to break it down and ask a few different questions to get folks thinking about how they actually fall into accessibility themselves. So we do this by asking, if they have a learning management system, if they use websites, if they post documents or videos, if they use different technology in the classroom, such as wikis or other supplemental information, if they use visuals like audio or video, or even just different conference technology like what we're using today for Collaborate. So kind of gives an idea to get people started to think. Administrative staff, it's when you're overseeing a project, are you actually working to integrate accessibility into the process itself? Do you train your faculty, or do you train your staff? And is it from a top-down approach, or is it from the bottom up? If you actually make an influence or decide on technologies that are going to be considered, whether it's in the classroom or university-wide, are you thinking about accessibility? Computer classrooms are really one of the largest areas that's problematic to get accessibility into, because the facilities and the groups that work on those are so far outside of the folks actually thinking about accessibility. We often see it after the fact, because the touch screens that are for the projectors or for the computer station or whatever it might be, is it ADA height? Is it going to be accessible? Is it going to be able to have a voice recognition or speech to text to it? Some of the different things like that. So are you looking, do you develop policies and procedures, and can you look at starting to implement accessibility into those? What committees are you on, and how can you start to talk about accessibility within those committees? And or are you an individual that you could possibly pull in and create your own committee specifically for accessibility? IT professionals. So IT, a lot of the time, you actually look to influence or purchase the technologies themselves. Those are also the individuals that are sometimes developing the websites or the applications. They are usually the ones that are overseeing the computer classroom setting. So those are the folks to start talking to about some of those things for accessibility in those classrooms. What about telecommunications? A lot of people don't necessarily think about telecommunications because, most of the time we have so much technology now that we can just chat and send email and everything else, but there's still a lot of things within telecommunications we have to think about. And then also, again, the classroom or conference technology. So by asking some of these questions, if someone could actually answer yes to any of them, then they could be posting, distributing, creating, developing, using, or maintaining something of an inaccessible technology. So that kind of gets a question out there to kind of get some of those people thinking of, wow, okay, I do play a role in this. So now what can I do for accessibility, or what can I do to make things accessible? So challenges around the procurement. I do start on this and I do harp on this a little bit, mostly because this has been what I have focused on for the majority of my 9-10 years in higher education. It was one of the focuses of my previous position, and it's the main focus of my new position here at Miami. So I say that because procurement really does allow you to draw a line in the sand of your accessibility versus your legacy. So if you can actually start to build accessibility, whether it's contract language or testing or whatever it might be, into a procurement, then essentially you do start to have a start date of December 1, we had contract language put in for accessibility. So from December 1 on, we've made vendors aware that we're looking at accessibility. Well, anything previous to that, you didn't have anything. So you can start looking at your contract renewals to get that accessibility in. And ultimately what you're doing is you're making the vendor aware that you're looking at accessibility, asking some of the questions that might be needed, and within a year to a year and a half, then you're starting to then have less legacy systems that don't have accessibility incorporated, or at least ask about, and within that year and a half time frame, because of renewals, you have more that actually have accessibility built in. So we really do look at that from all angles. So the procurement itself, it's a very large animal because there's a lot of different workflows. Your departmental purchases versus your university-wide purchases versus your library. So looking at your learning management system, that would be a university-wide purchase. Your library would be your databases. What are you doing to ensure that your databases are accessible? So the faculty that are selecting journal articles are selecting accessible journal articles. Departmental purchases is often your classroom or course-specific software. And are they checking about accessibility to make sure that software that's going to be used in the classroom is going to be accessible? So a lot of the universal design and things that we talk about are for documents, for the learning management system, for the design of our courses, but there's also these third-party pieces that we really have no control over sometimes, that we also have to say, well, how can we take care of that? So looking at the lack of awareness of accessibility and how it plays into procurement is not as much on a university side as what it is on a vendor side. Vendors will know for the most part in this day and age that accessibility is out there, but they don't want to actually claim that they know that accessibility is out there unless they've found the whole key point of, oh, hey, we're going to advertise accessibility so maybe we can make more sales. But at the same time, from a university perspective, your lack of resources, how are you going to be able to assess the accessibility of these services and these vendors to make sure what they are telling you is truthful? Then you also have the textbook selections. Textbooks, if you're, what do you do when there's no cost to something? If a textbook has a supplemental material and that supplemental material is now required in the classroom, and before you know it, you have an individual with a disability, how are they going to access that material? So these are just some of the different challenges around the procurement aspect itself and how it actually plays roles into the online learning environment. So within this, some of the common issues, I've mentioned some of them, but for example, the captioning for videos, that also could be a library database. Starting to build something into the library areas of asking vendors, do you provide captioning for your videos? Answer might be no. Next question could be, okay, if you don't, can we request captioning to be included, and within 24 to 48 hours, you provide that at no cost, and then that way it gets pushed out to all their users? Answer could still be no. Then why not ask up front if you as a university have the authority to add captions to that video when needed, so that way if someone comes in and says, oh, I have a student with a disability, and yeah, they're already a week behind because they just got into the class and I've shown 3 videos. Well, by the time you have to go and find that vendor, ask them for permissions, whether you actually hear back from them or not is a whole nother story, but then actually starting to provide captions for those videos, you could take care of all of that up front. You could also look at some of those same aspects for documents in the library databases. Some of these different things are going to be things that we always look at or always have to be considerate of, even though we may not necessarily think about it.
Kara, can I add one thing to the last?
Sure.
This list of common issues, this is actually pulled from the findings on that recent litigation slide that Kara was talking about recently. We really didn't make up all of this list of stuff. This was literally pulled from a lot of those, lot of that litigation that took place between the individuals with sensory impairments and higher education institutions. So keep that in mind as you go through planning and trying to integrate accessibility into the different technology platforms that you're considering on your campuses.
All right, great. This is also going to be something, if any of you are part of EDUCAUSE, IT Access is one of the subcommittees that they have there, and they actually have a lot of great tools. If you just go to the EDUCAUSE website and search for accessibility, I believe the first page that'll come up will actually give you some information, and will give you 3 links to different Power or PDF documents, and one of those will give you the top 7 issues within accessibility of higher education. So moving on is looking, what does accessibility or electronic information look like? Well, it really looks like everyday technology. We're using either Microsoft or Google at our higher educations. We pretty much have to use Adobe because there's really nothing else out there that's a competitor to it. These are things that are everyday technologies that we still have to look to see whether or not the accessibility standards are met. It's not just going to be your specific course information or whatever else from there. So how do you know if something's accessible? Well, you don't unless you ask. So first and foremost, you got to know your guidelines. So look to see if there's a university policy about accessibility. Do the vendors have a VPAT? So a VPAT is a Voluntary Product Accessibility Template. Try to say that 10 times fast. So a VPAT is something that's going to be essentially an accessibility checklist. If a vendor does not know what a VPAT is within this day and age, just run. They don't know what accessibility is. They haven't put it in as a priority within their development because this has been around since 2001. So, well over 15 years now, and if they haven't really known what a VPAT is, then that gives you a very good idea of where they consider accessibility in that. Go to their website and actually just do a search for accessibility. See if anything comes up. That sometimes will give you an information as well. See if they have any testing documentation to show the accessibility if they do have a VPAT. Some vendors are starting to actually provide a roadmap within their VPAT to show you in Q3 of 2018 is going to have this update to take care of this issue, whatever else from there. When we're testing applications, we'll actually ask vendors for roadmaps. So that way they'll provide that to us regardless of whether they've already had it provided or not as part of their VPAT, and keep that as documentation to kind of just keep the vendor honest a little bit to make sure they're going to move forward and update things as they need to. And then the other one is, how are other institutions checking for accessibility? So anybody in the audience want to say anything about what they're doing? I'm going to go no. All right. So looking at some of the similarities from face-to-face to online learning in regard to that procurement, as well as the different types of areas that we've talked about. Really, the very meat of it is students are the focus. If we focus on that, then everything else kind of plays into it. So textbooks and the supplemental content, it's a very slow process. Yes, we got one person chatting back with us. Accessibility is a slow process. It certainly doesn't happen overnight, but you do have to start somewhere. So trying to find that area that really does work best for you, whether that's e-learning, whether that is a procurement office, whether that's legal counsel, find your unicorn, find that one area that's really your advocate, and build that up as much as you can, and then the rest will kind of fall into play a little bit. But looking at the student focus, one of the biggest things is our textbooks and the supplemental material, because those are third-party applications. Then you have your learning management system and your content, so your videos, your documents, your library databases, even some of the websites or things like that that might be used within the LMS. Then you have the larger university-wide software applications, or maybe larger course applications that are being used. And then finally, the teaching enhancements that are used to provide the best education possible. So when we're trying to find whatever newest technology to teach to get our students involved, we're doing that to give them the best education possible. But are we considering accessibility in that, and how can we have an interactive course but still provide accessibility within that aspect? So those are some of the things that we're going to dive into a little bit more in regard to some of the universal design pieces. So for right now, we want to do a poll question. So Corey's going to put up on the screen shortly after a poll for you to select one of 4 options. So the case study is going to be this. A course is wanting to use an online human anatomy application for supplemental teaching. The course is designed in HTML5, recently updated from Flash. So for anyone who might not know what that is, Flash, if you had an iOS device, you can never even use Flash, because Flash being an Adobe product, they didn't work well together. So that kind of gives you an idea of how limited Flash was. HTML5 is a newer HTML code, so think of it as online web-based stuff. So that kind of gives you a little bit of a old versus new. So the course is designed in HTML5, has some accessibility built in, but not enough for someone who would be using a screen reader to actually be able to access all the same materials. So what can you do? So with that said, it's the don't purchase the product is number 1. Number 2 is ask the vendor to make the product accessible. Number 3 is find an alternative teaching solution. Or number 4 is all of the above. So you're going to see a poll come up on your screen. And if you could, just take a second and go through and answer. All right. So it looks like the majority of folks are answering all the above, with the second one being ask the vendor to make the product accessible. So this is actually a trick question, and we did that purposely, so that way we could actually see what people would think. In this regard, it's going to actually be a little bit of all of the above. It's going to be based upon the policy that you have in place, and what you can try and how those attempts are going to work and what the response is going to be from the vendor. So potential next steps would be working with the vendors, asking them if they can make the product accessible. Another one could actually be testing the application to see where the issues are going to be. And by doing that, you could maybe ask the vendor to create a roadmap to incorporate the changes that you found within the testing of the application. In the meantime, we still have to provide some type of equal access. So is it maybe looking at the program and asking the vendor, can those images be pulled out directly from the application and added to a 3D printer so you could still get that 3D effect because it's an online anatomy. Finally, going and looking at the contract language and ensuring that the accessibility is in that contract language, including that VPAD or that roadmap, or there's also a term here, the alternative action plan. It's actually something that if you check out Cal State, also University of Colorado Boulder, both actually have now incorporated an equally effective alternative action plan. And what this is essentially anytime something's purchased that doesn't fully meet accessibility, which is pretty much all the time, the requester is going to submit something to show this is how I can still teach the information by not having to use this exact product. And basically, it's an alternative action. So it's an alternative teaching method for when a student with a disability is coming into the classroom. That is something that can be worked out and with your student's disability office, whatever along those lines, but that's something that Cal State and Colorado Boulder are actually having their faculty produce. So that way you still have something in place regardless to make sure that everyone's going to have the information. So looking at some of the examples and design considerations and some of the different resources and things. So this is actually a slide pulled out from Portland Community College. The link's at the very bottom. They have a wealth of information, and they have a lot of good things out there, one of which is a web accessibility handbook, highly recommended. This is where the slide came from. So it's talking about the anatomy of an accessible page, but in reality, it's actually showing a syllabus, and it pulls out and shows you the headers. It shows you the format for listings of different bullets or whatever it might be. It shows you the table and shows the column, rows, and headers. It goes through the sufficient color contrast, the different types of images and different types of alt tags based upon a smiley face versus a chart or graph. So it gives you a lot of information of what is needed in a document or a website to ensure all users can access this. So with that said, these are going to be just a couple different slides showing some different examples. One is going to be graphics have a meaningful label. So it's not just going to be a photo or an image, or it's not just going to have a blank nothing. You can actually go through and put in specific information. So it could be, whatever X university logo. Or if it's going to be an image that really has no direct important meaning, then you can do an open and close quote, and then that way it allows that image to be skipped over. So also one of the other top areas, yes, so we can share the PowerPoint that will have that link at the bottom for the accessible documents. It is from Portland Community College, so if you actually go to the pcc.edu website and type in Web Accessibility Handbook, it'll take you to that direct link as well. So the other one is one of the popular areas that we see with accessibility issues is forms. Everybody has a search feature on their website. So looking at that, looking at color contrast as well, if the required items, are they only in red? Is there an asterisk? What information might be out there? So looking at the form fields themselves as well. And then one of the areas that we also see as a top common issue is keyboard navigation. So when you're using something, throw away your mouse and just go through and tab through the document to see, can you still get to everything, whether it's a website, a document, an application. If you can't access all the material, then that's a very quick and easy way to know that someone with a disability using assistive technology also won't be able to use it. So these are just some quick and easy things. Corey's actually going to talk about the universal design. We have some testing ideas and options, and we also have resources at the very end as well.
All right,
Corey?
thanks, Karen. So just talking broadly about universal design, one thing we want to keep in mind as we move forward, it's great if you have time to plan out the course that you're developing and you have the time to integrate accessibility. The challenge that we run into sometimes is that often we're you're moving kind of quick. You're moving pretty fast, so you have to develop solutions on the fly, and that's what we want to guard against. And so I want to kind of go through some examples of universal design and why we push it pretty heavily. So universal design, just a term in general, comes from architecture and kind of product development. An easy way to think about it, and I won't read through this entire slide, but an easy way to think about it is captioning benefits a lot of different people, curve cuts benefit a lot of different people, and I'll go through some examples in a few slides here. And Kara found this really nice graphic of a way to think about your users. Your users aren't just individuals with disabilities, and this is a way to pitch it when you're working with faculty members who sometimes may be resistant to integrating accessibility or feel they don't have time to integrate accessibility. There are a lot of people who may have permanent disabilities, but we also have individuals who have temporary disabilities that may impact their ability to access instructional resources in the classroom at a particular time. And then you have some situational issues that come into play. In this particular graphic, you'll see an individual who's a new parent or somebody who may be distracted and driving. They shouldn't be driving and actually trying to, look at things on their phone at the same time anyway, and hopefully they're not doing bartender and drinking thing at the same time. But you kind of understand how in certain situations, whether it be a noisy a coffee house or something like that where you're trying to study, or you have students who are non-traditional students, or you have individuals who may speak English as a second language and they're trying to understand the videos that are being shared in class. These English-only videos that are shared in class, they really benefit from captions and a lot of other tools that we try to integrate as it relates to accessibility. So these are just a few examples. Curb cuts are an easy one. A lot of people always think about it in terms of blind, low vision, but you have a lot of people who push strollers or who may have issues with navigating steps or things like that, who find that pretty easy. Always look for that. We also have sliding glass doors on our campus. We have sliding glass doors in our main kind of university building, which is the Johnson Center, and rarely does anybody actually grab and open a door anymore, which is very interesting, but you see a lot of people benefit from that. This is just an example of another physical access example of universal design in terms of integrating a ramp along with stairs to benefit users who may have mobility issues or issues with navigating stairs. Getting into actual hardware devices, we've seen in Mac OS X, there's a lot of accessibility built into MacBooks and iMacs, and then also those same accessibility features carry over into their mobile devices as well. So if there is accessibility built into the learning management system, an individual can take advantage of, say, VoiceOver on their iPhone or on their iPad to actually navigate the course and read accessible documents or read some of the content online and participate fairly effectively using mobile devices. Getting back into a lot of the tools that we are commonly discussing, or rather that we're discussing in this presentation, a lot of us don't realize that we have a lot of web-based tools that we already have access to. And library databases. This particular example right here is Education Research Complete, one of the EBSCO databases, and you'll find a lot of consistency across all of their databases. Is they have accessibility built in. So this right here happens to be an example of one of their articles that this is an HTML version that can be converted to a PDF document. They have a tool built in called ReadSpeaker, which allows an individual who wants to take advantage of the built-in text-to-speech capability to use it. Text highlighting, the ability to download an audio file, the ability to convert it into another language if you're more comfortable that way. We already have access to a lot of these things because our libraries are subscribing to a lot of the same resources. It's just a matter of pointing these things out so that people are aware of what's available to them. Another example here is Films on Demand. Again, our library subscribes to this to get a lot of different film titles, and they have built-in captions, as well as interactive transcripts and searchable video content. Again, these are really effective tools that not many people know about, and we started captioning here on our campus roughly about 5-6 years ago, about when there were faculty members who were making requests for videos that were on Films on Demand. We actually went back to Films on Demand and said, hey, can you, actually caption this video? And they were doing it. Early on, they would do it roughly about, I think it would take maybe 2 or 3 weeks sometimes early on. And then after a while, I think once people caught on, it was longer for them to turn around processing times. But this goes back to what Kara was saying about procurement. These are things we should be asking for up front. One of the things we did here as well, and I know some other institutions have done it too, is we looked at all the library databases that we looked at the top 25 databases that we were using here on campus that are most commonly used every semester. So we have a list that's been compiled over 3 years now of the top or the most used databases. We kind of found out what our top 25 were. We identified the accessibility, whether or not they had accessibility language or content on their websites, and then looked at the guidelines they use for accessibility and kind of did a reverse engineering of saying this is what we should be asking all the vendors for when you go to subscribe to new databases. So that's something you could think about too. And this right here is not so much to point out OzPlayer. While OzPlayer is from a company called Accessibility Oz, which is a really good company that we work with, who helps us with some web accessibility. But they have a tool that's called OzPlayer. It's free if you kind of use it on a single instances here and there. Kara can actually correct me on this, but you can purchase the university site license too for fairly cheap. I want to say it's roughly about $1,000 to $2,000 annually to be able to install this. Is that right, Kara?
It is fairly cheap, and California Technical College actually purchased it for all of their schools as a standardization for a video player, but also it's free for nonprofits if that nonprofit is under a certain amount of money each year or something.
Okay, thank you. And so one of the reasons that we wanted to put this example in is that it shows you what an accessible video player looks like, what you should be thinking about. Can all of the controls be accessed via keyboard? Does it include the ability to add accurate synchronized captions? The ability to add audio description as well? Is interactive video transcript a part of it? These are things that are not necessarily common when you look at some of, for example, here, we have some faculty members who still use the built-in Flash tool, or Flash video tool in Blackboard. And while useful for the average student, if you are a keyboard-only user, it's difficult for you to get in and access all these controls via keyboard. You also can't add captions to that player. And so that can be, these are things to consider when you think about what video platform do we need to put in our course, or should we be inputting in our online courses? All right, so and I want to dive down into universal design for learning a little bit. Again, this goes into planning. I don't want to get really heavy into concepts and all of that. I know when we talk about universal design for learning here, we kind of get slapped down because people think it's, don't talk to me about this new pedagogy, blah, blah, blah. And I think it's great. It's great to get that feedback, and it's kind of interesting because we then have to repackage it in another way. So we don't say UDL or Universal Design for Learning. We just talk about some usable strategies, and all you're doing is breaking down parts and pieces that can still be integrated that people will digest a little more effectively. So they may not like to hear UDL, but they do like to hear, flexibility in the course design, or reaching out to students early on to try and engage them before classes start. So it is pretty interesting. But some key points to think about in terms of UDL is you see that there are some instructional approaches now that do create access barriers for some students. And so UDL is just a way, or universal design is just a way to work around some of those barriers. In higher education, before I go on about UDL, in higher education, you might hear there are 3 different universal design models in higher ed. One is universal design for learning, one is universal design for instruction, one is universal instructional design. Instead of getting caught up in what one concept says versus another, the key thing to kind of take away from the three of them is flexibility in design. Now, while universal design for instruction and universal instructional design, the purpose of those was to provide a little more prescription, and so they offer you some more guidance in terms of what you should do in specific areas. UDL is much broader, and that was kind of what brought about those other concepts. But I still like to lean on UDL because it is broad and it offers a lot of flexibility, and it's fairly easy to grasp for some folks. So there are three core guidelines: multiple means of engagement, multiple means of representation, and multiple means of action and expression. And I'll kind of go into those briefly just to give some examples. One key thing to keep in mind is that we always hear too is whether or not UDL conflicts with current approaches. And actually it does, current instructional approaches, it really doesn't, because there are ways to integrate parts and pieces into a lot of the common instructional approaches that are out there, no matter what you choose to do. So if you choose to use project-based learning in your class, there are effective ways to implement UDL strategies that could be beneficial for your students. So principle one, which is multiple means of representation, really looks at how learners perceive and comprehend information. The example that I'm using here is just in terms of document accessibility using styles in long documents. I have that highlighted. And so with styles, what most people don't think about is that when you use styles in a long document, you're actually adding structure to your document. It's not uncommon for us to review a syllabus that's 20+ pages long, and for screen reader users, you have to go through that and listen to that left to right, top to bottom, every word in that entire document if there is no structure added or no styles added. But when you actually create styles, you're automatically creating a table of contents for your document. And I have here highlighted in this, the larger image, the navigation pane. So when you show the navigation pane and you use heading styles, you actually create a structure that allows anybody to step through that document more effectively. So for a screen reader user, I can search based on this table of contents. So if I want to go to the grading section, I can just do a search for headings, go to grading, and move directly to that place in the document, as opposed to having to do a find command just to find the word grading or something like that. But styles are really easy to add. Another example of multiple means of representation is alternative text descriptions for complex images. You'll see on the left-hand side you have a process diagram for the Krebs cycle, actually. And this is, it would be hard for me sometimes to look at these complex images and really understand what I'm supposed to take away from them as a student. But if you provide this detailed description that's over here on the right, a lot of students can benefit from that. And it may be difficult for a faculty member to turn around these things in a day or two if you're asking them to do it quickly, but it's something that could really be built into a course if you have time to do it. Maybe it doesn't get done on the first revision of the course, but in the second revision you work on adding these detailed descriptions for these type of complex charts that are there. And these things that can be embedded in the notes section of a document, or can live as its own separate document in the course. If you think about document accessibility in the PowerPoint, it's pretty much the same thing. This is adding notes into slides and using those as captions, particularly slides that have audio files. So audio may not be, a lot of people may not be able to take advantage of the audio for one reason or another. It may not play properly. You take disability away from it. The audio may not play properly. So you could also benefit if you are somebody who has a hearing impairment and you need to kind of understand what's being said. You can take that information away. You know, we have a lot of students and even faculty members who want audio transcribed, whether it's audio they're recording for interviews or anything else. So you see a lot of people benefit from this. Another way of representing content is STEM content. We have a lot of challenges with, particularly in a short amount of time, converting STEM content into a readable format for screen reader users. And so we need more time to plan out those kinds of things, particularly if you look at that bottom image is handwritten. That needs to be retyped using a tool like MathML or using or rewritten in LaTeX in order for us to convert it into a format that a screen reader would work with. So these are things that you really have to think about and plan, that if you actually design it up front using LaTeX or MathML, then you've automatically made it accessible to a lot more users in the class. When you think about multiple means of action and expression, this gets at how learners interact with the learning environment. How do they express comprehension? One easy way to think about comprehension is assessments. I remember taking a class where there was a faculty member who gave us 4 main assignments, 4 main projects. And I think this was like a qualitative methods class or something like that. But one thing that was nice about it was that for every assignment, we had 3 or 4 different choices for how we would actually do that assignment. We could do a graphic representation with a short description, or like a 1 or 2 page description. We can actually write a 4 or 5 page paper, or we could actually do an oral presentation in front of the class that had to last, I think, 15 to 30 minutes or something like that. But you want to add something, Kara?
No, go ahead. Finish the slide. Go ahead.
Yeah, all I was going to say is finish up by saying was that giving students the ability to kind of take advantage of their strengths in terms of assessment can really alleviate a lot of stress and a lot of anxiety when it comes to these types of situations.
And just something to add to the math content, since that's really becoming a more popular area for higher education. A lot of faculty still do some handwritten content, or they may not know LaTeX or MathML. So if any of you are Google schools, or even if you're not and you have a Gmail Google access, your docs, there's now a new add-on called GMath, and it's literally just the letter G, math, and it will actually allow you to handwrite your content or even speak your content into it, and it'll convert it into a MathML format on the other side. So that way you can do a copy and paste and insert that into the material that you're using. So they've been doing a lot of stuff with that that makes it a little easier to make math accessible.
All right, thank you. And then for multiple means of engagement, I was talking to one of the researchers over at CAST, and she really said it a great way, which is that the purpose of multiple means of engagement is really to focus on the regulation of emotion to support cognition. So how do you engage learners and keep them motivated to learn? There are a lot of different ways to kind of think about doing these things, but you can heighten interest really by engaging students with welcome emails. So at the very beginning of class, before classes start, maybe emailing students to say, hey, these are expectations for the course. Do you have any concerns, anything you want to think about or add, or anything I should consider, blah, blah, blah. Those things can, be pretty inviting for students. Using announcements consistently throughout the course let students know how to prepare and continue to move forward and to look for those kinds of things. Small group activities, discussions, journals, and using personal reflections after each class can really allow students to kind of discuss how they're digesting that content. One thing I'll mention interestingly about journals is that for example, in Blackboard, we have a lot of students with vision impairments who have difficulty navigating discussions, but using journals or blogs within Blackboard are much easier for them to navigate because it's kind of less, I'll say less busy, for lack of a better term, right now. But those are different things you can think about in terms of engaging students. And then tying in real life examples, allowing people to kind of bring in their own work experiences can be really beneficial too in terms of keeping them engaged. Some additional considerations to think about. I wanted to throw this one slide in here because Kara and I, we've worked together for a number of years, and this is something to think about in terms of how you approach things practically. So if you remember back to those Word and PowerPoint slides, there are a number of things you can do to make a Word document or a PowerPoint document accessible. The difficulty that you have is that, one, not all faculty members are going to know how to do those things. They may lean on the instructional designer to help them with those kinds of things, and the instructional designer can maybe do it for one person, but not 10 to 20 who come and show up. And then also you may have a problem with pushback in terms of people wanting to adopt these kinds of things. So think practically about what gets you bigger bang for your buck, right? So what strategies will allow us to kind of get broad buy-in, and they're easy for faculty members to kind of digest and take advantage of. And these are some baseline design considerations that we had pulled together here at Mason, and Kara, and this also includes Kara's time here at Mason, which was alt text for images, for complex images. Video description was important, although we didn't have to do it often for our blind or low vision users. Styles and long documents, as I talked about, and then on websites, and choosing applications that support keyboard navigation and are compatible with screen readers up front. Those are things that can really limit the amount of work that we have to do to try and retrofit things after the fact. And when you think about students with hearing impairments, captioning all your videos and transcripts for audio files, but also making sure the transcripts are available for caption videos as well. A lot of students benefit from that. And for students, which really is the larger population of students being served in a disability services office, they may be students with some type of psychiatric, cognitive, or neurological challenge, using consistent navigation in tab order. And what I mean by that is, when I go in one online course, it would be nice when I go and take the other 4 or 5 online courses that I'm going to take in the future, that everything looks fairly consistent. I consistently understand what the navigation looks like. There's a consistent use of maybe modules or how courses are broke down, expectations, all that kind of stuff. The syllabus, making it easier for somebody to understand where they need to go to find information can be really, really beneficial and mitigate a lot of issues. And we wanted to throw in, before I summarize here, we wanted to throw in a few slides in for testing for accessibility and usability. And these are just some examples. It doesn't encompass everything, but it encompasses some things that we've used commonly. And these are some manual and automated examples. Manually, I'm going to assume everybody is fairly common with Microsoft Office's built-in accessibility checker. Now in Office 2016, it's under the Review tab, and then you click the Check Accessibility button, and it looks for three things in this in the checker. It looks for errors and warnings and tips. We've typically focused on errors and warnings because those are things that are most likely to impact users of assistive technologies, like screen reader users. And so that link that we have on the slide, rules used by the accessibility checker, when you go and actually access that link, you can see that it breaks down exactly what things it looks for under errors. It breaks down what it looks for under warnings and under tips. And not only do you get the inspection results, but you also get additional information. So when you click on an error, it tells you why you need to fix it, and it tells you exactly how to fix it. That can be really beneficial in terms of training faculty members on how to do some of these things on their own, quick fixes.
Another thing.
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
I'd like to add to that is one of the resource pages will also talk about a link from visionaustralia.org, and it's called a Document Accessibility Toolbar, and it plugs in, it's just another toolbar that'll show as a tab in any Windows Office product. But if you use that, it'll pull in all of the accessibility, such as headers. It'll actually allow you to just insert an image. It'll just say set alt text. Same thing when you do your tables, it'll actually come up and say how many rows and column headers, or is it a presentation? It'll start to, I guess, force feed and kind of pop up some of the things to help you incorporate accessibility. If you use that tool in combination with the free built-in accessibility checker, you really do have, I'd say, 75% of what the CommonLook Office Professional tool can give you that is an at-cost product.
Very true, and that leads me into CommonLook Office Professional. We've used this here. The price has jumped actually fairly significantly. I think it will this year, but it's been a pretty good tool. It installs as a Microsoft Office plugin, and it basically walks you through checking your Word or PowerPoint document for accessibility and creating an accessible PDF as a result of it. And so you can see in this bottom right image where it actually gives you all the checkpoints The ones that are in bold text are the issues in your document, and you can literally click on each of those. It's based on WCAG 2.0. You can also add checking, as it relates to 508 and some other standards or guidelines. But it's a nice way if you maybe have a workflow where somebody's dedicated to doing these kinds of things. This isn't something that we had success throwing at faculty members because they just don't have time to digest this. But if you have a team or an individual or whatever who's doing this kind of remediation, it can be really beneficial. I'll mention 2 automated tools really quickly. Blackboard has a new accessibility tool called Ally. It is built directly into Blackboard. It will do an accessibility check of content that's uploaded to Blackboard. What's nice about that is that it's built into the course environment. It allows you to check the accessibility of documents based on the checklist that they have. They give you percentages, and it checks it based on it checks it against their checklist, but it gives you a percentage and allows you to kind of increase that percentage over time as you make changes and fixes. It gives faculty members feedback on what they need to fix and why they need to fix it, similar to the Microsoft built-in accessibility checker, but it also does institutional reporting as well, which is really, really nice. So from an institution-wide perspective, you can actually start to look at how accessible your uploaded content is. One drawback I would say right now, it's early because it's not going to be released until April. One drawback I would say right now is that it doesn't look at the course platform itself. It only looks at uploaded content. And then the last thing I'll mention is UDOIT. I see a couple of people mentioning that in the chat. UDOIT is a free open source tool that works with Canvas. We've seen a lot of presentations from the folks at the University of Central Florida who designed it and have integrated it into their course platform. It's a really, really useful tool as well. It's something I would encourage you definitely reach out to the UCF folks about their experiences with it and how they've tweaked it over time. In the resources, we'll have a link to it, as well as a video kind of describing what it does. But just it checks for appropriate use of headings, alternative images, a lot of the common things we've been talking about, and they've been continuing to add fixes and tweaks over time. And so go ahead. I'm sorry.
I would just want to add to that, if you are a Canvas user, that if you're using UDOIT, it really is best to implement UDOIT in a way that you're teaching faculty to select only certain areas to test at once, because if they run UDOIT for the first time on their entire course, then they could be very overwhelmed by the hundreds of errors it comes up with. Whereas if you do it and push it out in a way of teaching them only select your modules or assignments first, and then maybe your syllabus second, and then your discussion boards third, and do it piece by piece, it's a little bit more tangible for the faculty, and then that way they can actually say, okay, yeah, I can actually work on that. Whereas if they do it all at once, then sometimes you might get a lot of calls from faculty saying, oh my goodness, I can't do this. So just something to think about if you are pushing out that UDOIT through Canvas.
All right, that is it. If you guys have any questions, please feel free to ask. We have a few minutes before we have to end here. You can also email Kara and I directly, and we'll be happy to answer any questions we may have. We've received some emails already about a copy of the presentation. Anybody that emails us, I will send the copy of the presentation directly to them.
Corey and Kara, this has been excellent. I mean, there's just a wealth of information here. So thank you for doing this session.
Thank you for having us. I appreciate it.
It's always a great conference.
We probably could have gone another hour with all the stuff that's in here and probably all the questions people have. But thanks to everyone for attending. I want to thank our sponsors, D2L, MediaSite, and Starfish by Hobsons. We really appreciate their contributions. Thanks to Corey and Kara, and I hope I can see most of the folks in this session, and it's just going to start in a couple of minutes. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Bob.
Great. Thanks, Bob. Take care.
Take care.